Alan here with Sonic Electronics, and today we're going to be talking about backup cameras. We'll be doing a brief overview of some options to consider before purchasing, and then we're going to show you how to install one in a vehicle step by step, so stick around. The blind spot directly behind a vehicle extends about 30 feet on average. This contributes to the 50+ back over incidents that occur every week in the US. A backup camera gives you an unobscured view of what's behind your vehicle, effectively clearing up that blind spot, making backing up not only safer, but also much easier and more convenient. There are several different universal cameras to choose from, such as small bracket mounted or surface mounted cameras, license plate frame or license plate bar style cameras, or if you're lucky enough, there actually may be a vehicle specific camera for your vehicle. These are typically replacement trunk or tailgate handles with a camera installed in them, giving you a clean OEM look and feel. Now, of course, there's several different options for displays as well, such as an aftermarket car stereo, which is probably the most common, a rear view mirror monitor, a standalone dash mounted monitor, or of course integrating into your factory car stereo display, but this will typically require a special harness or interface. Now, of course, installation can vary slightly depending on the vehicle itself, the display that you're using, and of course the functionality that you want, but for the most part the concept is exactly the same. You'll have to connect the camera to power, get the video signal to the display, and connect the reverse signal wire. A reverse signal is simply any wire that has a positive 12 volts while the vehicle is in reverse. This will need to be connected to the display's reverse trigger wire, which will then automatically switch the video source to view the backup camera's image when the vehicle is in reverse. The most common place to find this reverse signal is at the actual reverse light at the rear of the vehicle. However, it can also be provided by some aftermarket stereo wiring harnesses, or may be found in the factory wiring in the front of some vehicles. Using one of these other sources eliminates the need to run an additional wire from the back to the front of the vehicle. Note that some monitors may have signal sensing, which replaces the reverse trigger by detecting that there's a video signal present. This is most commonly found with standalone and mirror monitors. The most common method for making these connections is to power the camera by tapping into the vehicle's reverse light positive and negative wires, while at the same time connecting a wire for the reverse trigger to the reverse light positive wire, and then running both the reverse trigger and the video cable forward to the monitor. With this installation method, the camera only has power while the vehicle is in reverse, and the monitor, of course, is triggered at the same time and automatically shows the backup camera's image on the display. Alternatively, if you'd like to view your backup camera's image at any time, not only while the vehicle is in reverse, the camera will need to be connected to a switched or accessory power source. This is any 12-volt source that turns on or off with the key. And the connections for the reverse trigger and the video signal are the same as in the previous example. With this installation method, the monitor is still triggered while the vehicle is in reverse to automatically show the camera's image while you're backing up. But because the camera always has power, you're able to view the image at any other time as well. For this installation method to work, your monitor will have to support manual switching to the backup camera's video source. This feature is most commonly found with aftermarket car stereos. Now, before installing, it's always a good idea to plan out your install. Knowing what wires need to be connected and what wires need to be ran throughout the vehicle, not only will it help you save time, but it will help you avoid making mistakes during the installation. Some of the common tools you're going to need for installation are an assortment of screwdrivers, panel removing tools, crimpers or wire strippers, electrical tape, an assortment of connectors, a drill and drill bits, and of course a multimeter. Now, of course, every vehicle is different, but these are some of the tools that you should minimally have to complete the installation. Now here we are in our Toyota Venza, as you can see. And a couple of the products that we're going to highlight today for this install are going to be the Crime Stopper OEM replacement mirror monitor, and of course our Belva Barcam 221. Now, some of the features that the Barcam 221 offers is, of course, it can be used as a front camera or a back camera, and it's fully adjustable. But one of the highlights is that it actually includes a micro DIN connector, which makes your life a lot easier when routing the cable compared to bulky RCA and power connectors that some other cameras actually offer. So to give you an idea of some of the connections that need to be made today for this backup camera install and other installs like it, we need to actually plug in the extension to the Barcam 221. That extension allows us to hook up power to the camera, which we're going to connect to the reverse light. And of course, it's going to give us our supplied video output and extension cable, and we're going to run that from the back of the vehicle to the front. Now, of course, with the video cable ran to the front, we're going to plug that cable into the supplied harness for the Crime Stopper replacement mirror, and that's going to supply our video signal to the screen. Now, of course, we're going to need to also tie power into the mirror as well, but we're going to cover that a little later on. By default, the Barcam 221 is designed to be used as a backup camera with fixed guidelines. However, if you choose to use it as a front camera, removing these two jumpers will disable the reverse imaging and remove the fixed guidelines. And one cool thing about the Crime Stopper video mirror monitor is that it features video signal sensing, eliminating the need to run a reverse trigger wire from the back of the vehicle to the front. So here we are at the back of the car. Now, of course, this is where our camera is going to mount. Before we can actually mount the camera, we're going to need to drill a hole in order to route this cable to the inside. So we're going to want to remove some of the interior panels because, of course, we're going to need to route the cable. And we're going to want to know before we drill what's on the other side of that panel so we don't drill into anything and cause any damage. For those of you that are concerned about drilling a hole in your vehicle, take note that the majority of the backup cameras that are on the market today are universal and will require some form of modification or drilling in order to get the cable from the outside of the vehicle to the inside of the vehicle. However, there are some exceptions to this rule, like vehicle-specific backup cameras. These type of cameras often don't require you to drill or modify your vehicle in any way. They're simply more of a plug-and-play solution that discreetly install and look like they came from the factory. Now with the panel removed, we can clearly see that there's no obstructions on the opposite side of the license plate frame. So it's time to remove the frame in order to test fit the camera and drill our hole. Now we said at the beginning, because of the unique 4-pin DIN connector that the Belva Barcam 221 uses, this enables me to actually use a relatively small drill bit without drilling giant holes for a video and a power cable. When routing through sheet metal, it's important to use a rubber grommet for two reasons. One, to protect the cable from becoming damaged, and two, to create a better waterproof seal. You may notice that our grommet was slightly oversized, but what I did was I went ahead and cut it down to ensure a perfect fit around the cable and a tight fit to the vehicle's body. So now that we have the cable on the inside of the vehicle, we now can continue to the next step of the install, which is routing the cable forward to our monitor. Now, of course, every vehicle will be a little bit different, but it's safe to say that if you follow the original factory wire loom, you'll wind up with the cleanest install overall. Now that we got our backup camera harness in place and everything tidied up, it's now time to tap into the reverse light for this particular install to provide power for our backup camera. Now, of course, our reverse light in this particular vehicle is located in the hatch of the car, where others may be located in a different location. Before you can tap into power, you first need to identify which wire is positive and which wire is negative. Now, with our multimeter set to DC volts, it's now time to probe both the wires in the reverse harness plug. Now at this point in the install, it's always nice to have a second set of hands to put the vehicle in reverse while you're taking this measurement. What you should be seeing on your multimeter is approximately plus 12 volts. If your multimeter says a negative value, that just simply means your polarity is switched. Now with our test completed, we've identified that our gray wire is positive and our white with a black stripe is negative. Now for this particular connection, we're going to be using the method of a military splice. This involves stripping the wire back, poking a hole in the strands to separate them, and taking your wire from your backup camera, in this particular case our red positive wire, and inserting it through the separated copper strands and twisting it around the wire. And then we need to isolate it with some tape. Now that we've gone ahead and made our connection for our positive wire, we need to just repeat that step for our ground. Now there's other methods of connection, of course, such as solder, butt connectors, or even T-taps. However, other connection methods like T-taps can actually come loose over time and can cause a bad connection. We chose the military splice method because it's easy and effective and secure. Now that we're done buttoning up the power for the backup camera, it's now time to route the RCA video cable from the back of the vehicle to the front. Now this particular step is different for all vehicles. Some may require you to take apart more panels on some cars than others, and it may be easier in some cases depending on the vehicle to route the cable forward, up top along the headliner, or you may run it down below along the side panels. And on trucks, you'll route the actual video cable underneath through the frame rail. In most vehicles, you're probably going to encounter a rubber boot like this, where the hatch or the trunk lid meets the body of the car. This can be a little challenging to run the head of the RCA video through, and you may want to use a wire feeder or some spray silicone to make it easier to get the head of the RCA through the rubber boot. Now you'll want to use caution in this step and not pull too hard to prevent damage to the head of the RCA cable. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to route your cables alongside of the factory OEM cables, zip tying or taping every 6 to 12 inches to keep everything nice and tidy. For this particular install, we're going to be routing the RCA video cable along the top along the headliner. Now you may be installing other equipment at the exact same time as the backup camera and maybe routing those cables forward. And depending on your particular vehicle or your application, it actually may be easier to run the cables through the side panel of the vehicle to the monitor. Now that we got the video cable forward, it's now time to install our aftermarket rearview mirror monitor. You may notice in this particular install that there's power running to the factory mirror. This is to provide power to the onboard compass. Now this particular customer didn't mind losing out on his factory compass, and this is something that you may want to pay close attention to when switching out factory equipment for aftermarket, because you may lose out on certain features. Now this factory power plug for the OEM mirror does present an opportunity to tie into switched power. However, we're going to show you a more common location to grab power for our rearview mirror monitor down at the fuse box. Now as you can see, the aftermarket rearview mirror monitor slid right onto the factory mount, as most aftermarket rearview mirror monitors do, making installation super easy. So now that the mirror is mounted, it's as simple as running the power and video cable across the headliner, down the A-pillar, to the fuse box where we can make our final connections. Here we are ready to make our final connections, and as you can see, this is the thicker cable coming down from our rearview mirror monitor and our RCA video composite cable coming from our backup camera. And we need to make sure that we plug this in to the appropriate input on the rearview mirror monitor, labeled video input. Now with our RCA video plugged in, all we need to do is make our final connections to power and ground. As we said at the beginning of the video, there's various locations where you can tie in for a 12 volt switched power source. For this particular install, we're going to be using this fuse tap right at the fuse box and tying into the switch source for the radio. Now of course you're always going to use your multimeter to verify anything that you tie into prior to making that connection. So now with this fuse tap, we can go ahead and tie that on to the red wire of the rearview mirror monitor and go ahead and plug it into the fuse location of the fuse box, finishing up with our ground and tidying up our cables. Now it's always a good idea to make sure that everything works before you actually start to button up the vehicle. So before you do, I would definitely throw the vehicle in reverse to make sure that the backup camera and the monitor work properly. Now with everything tested and working properly, you now can go ahead and button up the rest of the vehicle and enjoy your newly installed backup camera.